So in this process, there's three things you could do. So you can choose to have chat. We have a messenger function. You can send an inquiry. So this is a bit more formal, where you're sending a formal request of this is what I want, these are the details, etc. And the last one is a new feature we developed or rolled out recently called RFQ request for quotation. So you can send a request and wait for multiple suppliers to kind of answer your bid. Now, let's say that based on your selections, you kind of get a sense, ideally about 10 to 20 suppliers that you feel like they could be of a fit. And the next step is to actually engage with them to understand kind of what's your capacity to validate a lot of these things that you might have seen, but maybe unsure on their website. So in this process, there's three things you could do. You could do all of them. You can choose to do a few of them. So you can choose to have chat. We have a messenger function. So you can speak with each of the representatives from those suppliers. You can send an inquiry. So this is a bit more formal, where you're sending a formal request of this is what I want, these are the details, etc. And the last one is a new feature we developed or rolled out recently called RFQ request for quotation. So you can send a request and wait for multiple suppliers to kind of answer your bid. I would say that these three options are ordered in the order of how finalized or how confident you are with your requirements. So if you're still kind of in the initial phase, you aren't super sure about like what exactly you should ask for or what's the must-have, what's the nice-to-haves, then maybe starting with just some chat to understand the general industry and landscape. But maybe we are a bit more confident about, okay, I think this is what I want, then you can go for more inquiry. So the request for quotation is best when you have a very clear list. These are the 10, 15 things that I have clearly defined, and I want to look for who can perfectly answer all of that for me without me having to go into each of them, and this could be a good option. But it does require that you have clearly defined and finalized all your requirements, because otherwise if you change your requirements, you have to rerun the RFQ again and wait for suppliers to answer for your request. So that's the first thing. So then the second thing, when it comes to communicating with our suppliers, so let me show you the interface first, and we can get into some of the communications. So let's say that, let's just use this one. So you can go in, I'm clicking into the products. So that's why you're seeing a slightly different screen as what we saw earlier. But here again, you can kind of see kind of what's the reviews, what's the sales volume, any highlights about their ranking. And this is kind of their supply information. And then some general information about kind of what's your quote based on your quantity requirements. There are two buttons right here. So one is the send inquiry, the other one is chat now. So the inquiry, if you click on it, you can see this will be more of a formal inquiry interface where you have to define your quantity, describe kind of specifically what are your needs, and then you can also get support from our AI assistant to help you generate it if that's helpful. And then you will have a function to connect with your messenger. So that would be for sending a more formal inquiry to every specific suppliers. That's a great question, Mike. So the price, that's something that you need to validate, engage with your conversation with the suppliers to make sure they can give you a breakdown. And especially oftentimes, maybe for packaging, you could have choices, right? Maybe sometimes depending on your lead time, you have to do kind of the exploration with the suppliers on what's the cost by air, what's the cost and lead time by air, what's the cost and lead time by sea. All of these would be all the detailed discussions that you will have with the supplier. And then the other option is chat now. So for example, if you are maybe not super sure about exactly what are the things you need to define in your inquiry, this is a good place to chat with them. So this could be a cool place to say, hey, I'm interested in this. What are some of the typical shipping options, including their kind of lead time or MOQ requirements, things like that. So this will be a really good place to ask those ad hoc questions to help you fine tune your inquiry.
Hey, if you're enjoying this content, you're going to love the masterclasses that we host on a regular basis. We've got over 1,000 members in our private community, and over 400 of them are already doing over $1 million. We regularly host masterclasses with hundreds of students, and you can find out more below. Join us.
And then the very last function I just want to quickly show is the RFQ. So when you are looking for manufacturers, What you're seeing here is this function called request for quotation. So what this means is that you are gonna share your request publicly to the suppliers. You're gonna define kind of what you're looking for, maybe upload some files. You can get support from AI to draft that. And then it's gonna get published to all of the relevant suppliers so that they can then answer to your request. So this is where you can post an RFQ, and then you will see for each of your RFQ, you might get maybe dozens or hundreds of responses from the suppliers saying, based on your request, this is what we can offer you as a quote. So this way you are kind of seeing comparable quotes based on that one specific request from multiple suppliers. So it will really help you save time as opposed to sending kind of those RFQs each individually to the suppliers. So that's kind of the three options that I kind of mentioned here. And then when it comes to communication with the suppliers, a few things that I want to call out. So usually you will have a first initial outreach, and then you may have a few rounds. So don't think of negotiation or your communication, especially if you're in the chat function, as just a one-stop shop, right? There's multiple layers of communication or different steps in the way. So in the very first beginning in your outreach, you want to make sure a few things. First, your goal is to understand, can they actually produce or develop those products based on your specific specs and requirements, right? It's really important to validate. You want change in color, you want an addition in function, or let's say for our binocular, we have the cap, where the cap has to have a string attached to it, right? So all of these things are important for you to validate with the supplier if they can do that or not. And the second thing is that because this is kind of our first initial engagement, we don't recommend, like at least based on what we have heard from our buyers, sometimes you don't talk about price right away, right? Instead, you want to get them hooked, get them interested, and think that you could be a long-term, large-scale buyer. So in this process, what you might do is you might want to ask for quotes, especially in the second step or in the initial phase of building an impression, to talk about maybe not only your real anticipated quantity, but also maybe a 3x quantity. So this way you're kind of building an initial sense that you want to grow the business large. You might expand to kind of a larger scale when it comes to your order side. And then for all of the other things that you may have already seen on the website, such as the MOQs, the lead time, the customization options, the packaging options, and the shipping options, or do they have on-site checks? Can they offer checkups for you? Can they offer an inspection for you? Do they have any videos? All of these things we will recommend you to validate again with the suppliers. On the one hand, it's a triple check, but also it's a really good way for you to assess, okay, is this someone easy to work with? Are they willing to engage with you? Do they kind of have the ability to understand your questions? And I'll give you different options along the way. And then at this process, you have built some level of rapport of like, okay, they think that you're a serious buyer, you have your serious ideas, and maybe you have the opportunity to go big over time.